goodness, we were late. Wow, just a couple seconds late, though. I was like, we're over here bantering in the back room, chit-chatting, and before I knew it, I'm like, oh my God, we gotta go live, we're trying. All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. What is today? Today's the 12th. Hard to believe we're already into 2024. We lost Bill Belichick after 24 years, 24 years? 24 years. There's got to be something with that number 24, right? So anyways, welcome to this week's edition of Team Tim. We have our good friend and colleague with us here, Callen from MSP Bots, formerly, Sophos, formerly this, formerly that, also known as Prince, also known as, anyways. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. He is currently sitting at an airport, so hopefully his internet connection will kind of help and kind of stabilize, except for when the plane flies over. But anyways, I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard, one of your hosts here at Team Tim, along with our good friend, Mr. Tim Schnurr.
How's it going? Tim Schnurr, co-founder of Fort Mesa. Just a channel guy, hoping to shift left with Tim. So our weekly show on, I don't know, call it outsourced IT, outsourced security, kind of, I don't want to call it best practices because that sounds a little, but Jesse, take it away.
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Excited for today's show as we are talking all things AI, which is extremely unique because no one else is talking about that. But I think AI as it relates to MSPs has been a real firestorm lately. So I'm excited to get into this today. And again, I'm Jesse, founder of Power PSA. We help MSPs scale security programs for profit.
Awesome. And Callen, take a few seconds to introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Good to anybody that doesn't know me. As Tim kind of through my background, it's been all over the place. Probably the longest time was at ConnectWise, was an early on, and then stuck around for a few years after Toma, and left to go help a DevSecOps security startup that was focused on the MSP space. Actually, the first winner of Pitch It, which was my program years and years ago. That's the one I founded while I was at ConnectWise, and we sold that to Sophos. So when Tim sent me the kind of idea that he wanted to talk about shift left, that was important to me because we were trying to do that in 2017 and 2018 for MSPs. So we may have been a little bit ahead of where we were supposed to be, but you're definitely seeing it now. And I think, the AI side is apropos because before I ended up leaving Sophos, we were using some of the prompts and the work to reduce time to create the content, the automation content that you need, both from a security and a business perspective, by about 60 to 80%. So, I think that there are some real world applications that we're starting to see as these more complex things are going on. So it's definitely a topic area that I love.
Yeah. And so let's level set here on at least the concept of shift left, right? I know what that means, but what does that mean to our audience here of MSPs that are listening today? Rather than giving my own long-winded, maybe one or the three of you could talk a little bit about the heck is shift left.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it stems from an old military term, and it's all focused around boom. And so boom is a problem or an incident or a breakdown, right? Left of boom is before the problem, incident, or breach happens, and then right of boom is everything after that event. And so I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, but that's my understanding of the term.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone's heard the term like agile waterfall, like how you plan a project, right? Like, so shift left is also this convention of like, waterfall, you'd have to kind of do everything, and then eventually you'd like see if it worked. You build the rocket, right? Like, but you could just like build the engine and see if that worked instead of like building the whole thing.
Go ahead, Colin. The other, I think you're spot on, because it was that shift with DevOps, right? From a process. So DevOps, and everybody, people throw around the term DevOps, without putting a lot behind it. But that was the first real time that I think, Jesse, you nailed it, that we started looking at things before they happen to try and identify problems specifically within testing and quality and performance, and then incorporating security once it became DevSecOps. Right. And before you actually release software, before you release a product, before you release a service. And so that shift in the culture around developing largely software and infrastructure in the DevOps practices was where shift left took off. And then it's become much more important as compliance and security has been pushed into our products and practices as we went.
You know, I love that you bring that up, Callen, because when shift left first started becoming mainstream, so to speak, I was one of those purists that's like, well, that's not what it means. It's about in the development.
Right.
And why are we talking about it this way? And Tim, I think you and I actually had some arguments about that's what
we've had some pretty heated debates. Like, we'll bucket shift left in the same vCISO and fractional CIO in the same bucket these days.
Right. but at the end of the day, I'm a pragmatist, and I think that using it as a concept to shifting from being reactive to proactive allows it to help more people, right? So I laid down my arms. I'm welcoming in the shift left to the broad terminology with open arms.
And that's exactly where
it's funny.
Go ahead.
Oh no, my founder friend of Refactor was the same thing. Is like, if MSPs don't take on code, and if they don't take on this area, and they don't shift left to actually working on coding, and that's what it is. And he was a purist in the same way you are, and he's now kind of moved to this adoption, especially with simplification and visualization coming with GPT and what have you, into okay, we just need to make it consumable by everybody. And so Mike Frazier was the one who beat it into me, the exact same thinking that you had, and you're not wrong. It's just evolution of terminology, right?
Yep.
Exactly. And so that's kind of where I wanted to kind of like level set us right now, which is basically MSPs spend much of their time on dealing with the right side of boom, not the correct as in the right, but the after boom thing. They spend a lot of time on that, like reactive, when you look at NIST, like that framework, they spend a lot of time on MDR, XDR, SOC, SIEM, SOAR, like blah, blah, tool, right? All that kind of stuff on that reactive side. And they don't spend enough time on the proactive side, right? You've heard me say this 1,000 times before, right? We were able to maintain FedRAMP moderate with little to no tools because we were on the other side. We were in the preparation side. We had the documentation. We had the people and the process and the things in place to be defensible, right? And so that, at least for me, when I think shift left, I think become proactive. Boy Scout, be prepared, get on the other side of that. And it's not generally something MSPs think much about, because most of the tool sets, because we're all geeks and we want to buy tools and we want to get into that kind of whole, oh, what's my next tool and all that fun stuff. We spend a lot of time on right side of boom because,
How about try 500 tools?
Yeah, Tim, in the vendor showroom, right? So I came into the channel 2021, and I was like, wow, 75% of the room is right of boom, or reactive, right? And those tools sell, right? And a lot of MDR, any kind of detection and response, it's big business. And I don't know if it's necessarily a great business for MSPs. My personal experience in both left and right of boom is left of boom, you plan, you do it, there's no surprises, right? Because but on the right side, when you're looking at utilization of labor, it's fire drill, New Year's Eve, 3 a.m, right? You've got kind of this up and down, sometimes I need more people, sometimes I don't need anything. So I mean, that's just been my experience. Right of boom, there's been analogies a dime left of boom is worth $1 right of boom, things like that. And the preparation, as you said, it really just pays off. I just think it's a great business area to be in because of that. I guess transparency, the ability to budget and execute on. So
yeah,
exactly.
It's harder to sell, which is an area where MSPs have traditionally struggled with the more complex concepts because we're selling to non-technical people. Shift left still isn't completely ubiquitous in enterprise or DoD or anywhere else that I've worked in, but it's more broadly understood because they're selling to more complex companies, right? SIs have no problem selling shift left. MSPs struggle a little bit more because traditionally you have to bring concepts so simplified down to some of the people they sell to. And it's always driven me nuts because the first thing when Connectwise started shifting towards security, my big thing was identity. It's got to be identity, because that's the shift left for MSPs, right? If you get all that stuff done, it was compliance. John Ford and I talked about this when he came in, and it's you guys, right? It's prep, specialize, and make sure people have the right access, whether you're a 15-person company or a 50 or 1,000-person company, and it's harder to sell that because you're changing people's behaviors. You're not saying this will protect you because you can show all the flashing lights, but man.
I'm going to challenge that it's harder to sell. I do this
different.
a lot. Well, it is different because MSPs don't think that way. They think tool, fix the thing.
Right.
My tooth hurts, go to the dentist. Well, if you brushed every day, flossed every day, like don't eat sugary snacks, like if you prepped, you bet like left of your toothache. So, but here's one thing that I like to try to, and I educate our partners on, and that is doing stuff in their business like equal opportunity, sexual harassment, HR related things are common, practices, right? I'm going to start a business. I'm going to have a business. I'm going to need a business plan. I'm going to need a bank account. I'm going to need a tax. Like we do all this preparation stuff in every other area of our business except cyber. And why not cyber? Well, because we're afraid, we don't know. What if we get it wrong? Blah, 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 blah. And so it's literally shifting the mindset of you're doing the work already. Now just put a process in place to do it in the cyber realm.
Well, I think that's really important is that I feel like we haven't as an industry, there are definitely some stellar programs out there, and there's a corner of the industry that's really getting it right now. And they're being very successful because they're doing that. But I think as a whole, right, there's still room to grow. I think we can all agree with that. Yeah. And now we get the double whammy of AI. That's a whole nother thing we have to prepare for, right? So, Callen, I would like to just get your perspective, obviously, because this is your corner, this is your expertise. When MSPs are looking about integrating AI, right, whether it's in their operations, packaging it for their clients, using it for new offerings, what are some just general things to look out for and be aware of? Because like I said, it could be, is this a match made in heaven or tech debt hell? as we ask, right? So I'd love to get your perspective on those.
Let's try bringing you up here.
It's a little column A, little column B.
Yeah.
I think little column A, little column B. What I would say is when people come to us and ask us about help with it, there are kind of three areas that we have a realization that we're not necessarily prepared as an industry, except for a small corner, like you mentioned.
Right.
The first is the people that use things like IT glue, documentation, CMDB, whatever it is, compliance. They are so far ahead because they've already started that shift left, right? The idea of shift left is getting the process and the people and the expertise closer to that point of when the work's being done, right? AI is very, very similar, so it's a situation where, with compliance risk, with Fort Mesa, with all of these other things, with any type of documentation you're doing, you do that. The problem now is I have processes that are focused on largely reactive pieces. I'm not doing what Tim has presented, what or other Tim has presented, or what you help MSPs through. I am documenting what should happen should a specific thing happen, I'm not actually getting ahead of it. And the traditional documentation tools that we have in the industry are not designed to do that, to get ahead of it. Where, and this isn't me making a plug because I'm on your thing. This is me kind of talking through the fact that I think MSPs are struggling because when they come to us, they're struggling because they say, I have this process that can I just automate it? And the answer is usually no, because the process isn't great and I haven't spent the time to do it. It's documenting how they do it, not how they should do it. It's documenting how they're doing it. It's not putting it against standards. And there's some other areas I could talk to, but I'd love to get any of your perspective on what you're seeing with that when you go through.
Well, no, I think you're right. And it may have been a bit of a rhetorical question. So, it's exactly, I think you're right in that you say we all as technical people want to press an easy button and buy a piece of technology that's going to solve our problem. And I think a lot of times we sell to our customers that same way with that same value prop, and that's just not the case. Right. So we need to understand that a tool in of itself brings technical debt with it. And if we aren't prepared, if we aren't mature, if we're not ready to actually take that and leverage it correctly, it's going to provide more problems in the organization. So, this is a little bit of a touchy allegory or metaphor I'm going to use, but I always say, like, adding things without being ready for them. I use cybersecurity. Adding cybersecurity to your stack without having good processes in place for the rest of your business. It's like having a baby to try and save a marriage, right? It's the same kind of principle.
So I love
it is,
that.
and it's the same with AI because, and it's the same with automation, and we see it. And this is where Refactor back in the day didn't have the success that someone like Roost is now, right? We're same tool, right? Not the same tool, but the same tool, right? It's a visual builder for automation, right? And a visual tool for building process automation, and the same type of problems. And what has Roost had to do? They've had to build an entire robotic operations center in order to get the things done for MSPs because it's there and create these things. What do I do as an automation solution? I create bots that they have out of the process that fire at specific task points that I know isn't going to mess anything up because it's been tried and true so many times. And we can document those processes against the standards. So we're going, and then it does create tech debt. And that was something that I've been talking about. You create automation, it's the same as software. You're creating tech debt. You create documentation, you're creating tech debt.
Because
did we lose him?
I don't know who we lost.
Oh, he's back.
I was worried about my internet.
And I think that's right.
I'm on mute. I was saying if you modify your car, you void the warranty, right? So.
Right. It's like the remote starters we used to get put in at Best Buy, right? And then they fry your chip. You're down the road back in the 90s. So I think and that's an interesting thing you bring up about Roost and the whole RPA thing. I was one of the very vocal proponents of RPA, 1 or 2 years ago, saying this is the way MSPs need to go. But I think it's something to think about. Maybe a little rule of thumb to boil this down and give some basic advice is you need to be at an ITIL level 3 with your processes before you should really think about automating or AI or these things, right?
All right. All right, hold on. I'm going to do it again. A level what? From a like telephone level? What are you talking about? Explain that.
So ITIL is, I think a large portion set of our audience would at least know of ITIL. It's a standards framework for technical operations. So there's 5 basic levels, and I think it's 0 through 4 or 1 through 5, however you want to number it. But 1 is no process. 2 is, tribal or ad hoc process. 3 is there is a process and it's documented. 4 is there's a process and we improve it. And 5 is proactive, completely left to boom process, right? So, somebody did ask me this. So, Tim, you're right. You were right. Thank you. So that I would say look that up. Just look up the 5 layers of ITIL maturity and start it. And again, ITIL is deep enterprise level framework. And I don't think you need to go that deep. But I think starting to break up and categorize your processes which is what I do with my clients, right? As I sit down and I say, where are we at with each of these processes, in regards to your cybersecurity program and operations? Are we a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5? And then again, that middle layer where we actually have a process and it's documented and everybody does it the same. Once we're there, we can talk about automation, because then we can kind of do ITIL layer 4, improving the process, having KPIs, feedback, and doing it the right way, as Callen mentioned. So,
yeah, it's interesting. You kind of mentioned where people need to be at. MSP Bots, when Daniel originally founded it, was an RPA company purely. There was no dashboards, there was no BI except to build the bots, because he sold his MSP. He realized AI was coming, and he realized that there was going to need to be a platform for that, and no one wanted it back in 2018, 2019. Like they said, we don't know what the tolerance of our practices are to fire the bots. And he went to, there's a specific dashboarding company that has kind of taken over this space, and there wasn't a way to trigger his bots. So what he went back to people and said, okay, so you've got documented processes, they may be good or not. You can trigger off those documented processes, but you're waiting on a screen for something to turn red before you fire off whatever process or action you want the RPA to take.
Right.
And you've got no way of automating that, because the tool sets, going back to, the stack that we're in, we're not designed to truly embrace automation. So something that's been a frustration of mine, and I digress later because I want to finish this point, but my ADHD is telling me to go down this other point. But I'll try and make sure I don't lose it. So, but in essence, we had to go and build an entire BI platform to collect the data. We had to build an entire dashboarding platform in order to show people in real time, and actually just to trigger the automation. We went and spent 2 years building a platform that just allowed us to gather the data to trigger the automations within the process when it should happen, because it didn't exist. And it existed in all these other forms. And I think that kind of points to the maturity of where we are. And I think you're right that you have to be over a certain maturity before you truly embrace all automation. Can you take parts of AI? Can you take parts of automation and expand it? But as an industry, we need to continue to level up. And where the rabbit hole that I was going to go down was, we as an industry have conformed our practices and our processes and our SOP and our documentation, and we've been guided as an industry to do so, to conform to the tool sets that helped get this industry off the ground, because they have not adapted to our needs.
Right.
And as it's evolved. So that's a big problem that we've got to figure out how to solve. And because right now we're building our entire businesses around the business operating platforms that exist for us, not around what's the best process or compliance or practice that we need.
Yeah, it's why you hear things like, the death of the RMM is coming, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think, that I think that speaks to the frustration or some of what you're talking about, right? So,
yeah, certainly when we think about AI, right, like it does have its benefits.
We're gonna rewind, Tim. I don't want to. This word AI, obviously, has gotten thrown around.
I know.
I'm glad Callen said RPA, right? Because I basically left the Big Four and I was like, I'm not using the word AI ever until the robot walks into my room, right?
Yeah.
RPA, machine learning, bots, I'm okay with that, but the AI is just so.
Well,
so
but it is the. Go ahead.
So speaking of terminology, wouldn't you say? I think we would probably all say we've, as a general society, currently where we're at, equated AI with LLMs. Right, I think everyone equates AI with LLMs at this point, right?
LLM, large language model.
Thank you again. So your typical large language model, conversational AI bots like ChatGPT, Bard. What's the A one? Anyways,
there's dozens of there's dozens. So, but yes, I think that is
Anthropic.
part of
And
Yeah,
I
there-
posted something on your thread, Jesse, like with the guy like pulling the hood off, like AI. It's like if this, then that.
If then,
right?
if I love that. I used to use that like all the time up until this year, and now I'm like, okay, it's good enough that I don't. That doesn't make sense anymore.
Which is really, it hasn't come that much further though, because like LMLs are just like a variation of that. RPA, it's like you click the button, it does that, it fires something automatically. We're still kind of in that iteration of like a little if this then that. Maybe there's some learning, maybe there's some searching, but yeah.
So maybe we can get Callen to break that down for the audience a little bit, because I think that's a great point. Tim is like, we were all going off into the weeds there, so I appreciate that. Callen, can you give us your take on give us RPA, robotic process automation, AI, and then machine learning? Give us your three categories there. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't really break out automation versus AI, right? There's a thinking component, but I will say for current intents and purposes, it's the same thing. But until it has sentience or consciousness, AI and automation are the same thing, right? It's a mathematical equation that takes an action or makes or drives you to make a decision. But it's automation. It's just grabbing the data or utilizing the data in a specific way, which could be a large language model, which could be your GPTs, your generational prompts. It could be your image creators, and so AI is an all-encompassing term that essentially means that it can do something without or with minimal human intervention until we have consciousness. And hey, we might get there, the way it's going, it might make it self-conscious. And, we have a T2 moment, which, is interesting. I linked this because I think you guys are spot on that we've boiled down AI into GPT, right? Because that's where we go to it. But things that are incredibly more impactful are sitting right at the side, right? And you'll probably hear more about RAG next week from what I was reading about your podcast next week. But when we look at this, being able to build a vector database, right? A database that essentially tags information in a way that's retrievable by that thinking assistance, that thinking automation, and allowing it to augment the generation using industry specific, using company specific, using individual specific databases in conjunction with a large language model, right? A large language model is basically just a model of things that should happen based on certain inputs. And it just follows down. It's a really, really, really complex decision tree, right? Without there being a decision tree. The retrieval database, the RAG, is what that decision tree should be pulling from, which should be your compliance, your documentation, your processes, your SOPs. You've got these two things that should be working together to extend or replace a human action in decision making. And then what you need on the front end of that is the business intelligence to know what things and when to take those decisions, whether it's human or AI generated, or the RPA side, which is essentially just taking the human away from copy and pasting or pushing the button and making a machine do it, right? So it's really just what is triggering it. So the AI is helping drive to a faster, smarter decision based on the risk. Then it's retrieving that information to make that decision, and it may be generating a response, which is what GPT is, and then it's pushing the button for you. And there are different levels of maturity, and I kind of waxed poetic a little bit and threw the entirety of it behind it, but that's kind of probably maybe a little too in depth or double click.
No, I appreciate that. I think those are good frameworks to keep in mind as we think through this stuff, And so, I mean, I think taking that and understanding that, and then saying, okay, that is complex, and we do need to have some structure in our business, and maybe this isn't the right, or maybe there's better ways to use it. So now that I've successfully disqualified 75% of your customers, no, I'm kidding. No, but seriously, what are ways you're seeing MSPs who are saying, well, yeah, we know we can do better in things, but we want to get some quick wins to help our people. What are things they can start thinking about to get quick wins, to start getting benefits from this technology, to get some breathing room to start doing these improvements?
I think it's still largely the ML, right? Which LLM is the call it succession of ML, but ML still has a major place. I look at things, machine learning, right? Yep. So sorry, I know acronyms should be shared there, because a lot of MSPs don't have good structured data. A lot of MSPs don't have, like we talked about, 75% probably don't have the processes that they need. They need help. They need help from us as vendors to guide them through. We need to help them by identifying, and that's kind of one of the things that seeing MSPs do this, things like attendance, right? Like things like micro training, right? The most utilized thing on my platform, there's two things on our platform. There's automated ticket dispatching based on an ML model that we worked with a couple of the Empire builders on to wait. You can go in and change 5 or 10 different things, and it just does 80% of the ticket dispatching. Right. We don't have AI yet looking at the sentiment, changing the status of those tickets and all of these other things, because I wouldn't trust it. I still want the human to look at that because these are my clients and I care about customer experience. AI will probably be there in a couple of years, but for now, let's let that person intake the request, make sure everything's categorized correctly, and then the machine can weight it and hand it to a technician. So we're not cherry picking anymore. So we're not having a tier 3 tech that's bored going and resetting passwords. So and also from the tech's perspective, so they don't get stagnant, right? They shouldn't be wanting to go do that. We can get this in front of them. So what are the other things? We're doing things like micro training, right? Oh, I forgot to put next steps on a ticket, right? So hey, here's a reminder in Teams. Hey, this ticket, you didn't put next steps in. Do you want to do that now? Do you want to change the status? Hey, this didn't have a configuration, right? Just looking through those things, right? Yeah, exactly. You're trying to understand the situation and then apply these small things, because you mentioned the tech debt earlier. If I completely automate a process end to end and I'm not monitoring it for 99.99% reliability, and that process fails and it drops and I have a breach, I lose a big client, I lose data, the backup doesn't go. Like, I'm still at the point where I don't know that I trust the infrastructure or the SOPs to do more than 1 or 2 little tasks. And that's what I'm seeing MSPs do. Take away waiting for that thing on my dashboard to turn red and just take one simple action. Take one simple action, and then we can keep moving through.
I think the way we think about data, it can help with the way we think about data. Like you said, just being so structured with data, we're not probably as structured as we should be. And that's where, ML can help, is the proverbial needle in a haystack, because it knows what a haystack looks like. It knows what a piece of hay looks like, and it knows what a needle looks like. And it can make those computations way faster than a human can. But the human still needs to actually take the needle and sew something with it, right? So that's
of course the guy with cows in the farm would talk about needles and haystacks, right?
I would. Yeah, I'm not going to miss an opportunity for that.
So we're about halfway through. We've thrown out a lot of acronyms. Hopefully, we've justified them and qualified them along the way. A new one, RAG. Really, maybe I heard of that, maybe I haven't, but. So as an MSP, right, because brass tacks, right, we're seeing the term AI thrown everywhere. Maybe what they really mean is a large language model that we can chat, interact with. Maybe they mean some sort of machine language type thing. As brass tacks, I'm considering adding the new AI buzzword tool to my tool set. Like, what should be one of the first things I do? Like, yeah, it's $20 a month. Add it on. Ooh, I just signed up for Bard Chat, Jesse GPT, right? So, Cow GPT, whatever you want to call it. Like, what is something that me as an MSP, like, what should I do? Like, all these things are being thrown at me. I'm just going to keep signing up for stuff, even if I have a free 100-year trial or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, Tim. There's this whole piece of risk to think about, and we're seeing things emerge in terms of, this LLM or AI world, fourth party risk. You might be using a vendor who claims AI and who's just APIing everything to Chat GPT, right? And
that's it.
So Callen, I think maybe let's shift left, and let's talk about some ways to secure and start thinking about risk as we've talked about the use for these tools, but now what's the downside or the dark underbelly, the lower level of the iceberg, so to speak.
Yeah, use your compliance, get your policies in place. I mean, like that's number one, right? And that isn't. I mean, like, I know that's the nature of the show, but get them in place, because if you don't have them, you can't do this stuff. So I was at a conference recently and met the founder of a company called Liminal. It's a AI risk management and securing platform for enterprise, and they work because when you open the doors to automation and AI, you have to decide what highways you're opening to risk. And so if you don't have the policies and procedures in place in order to do that, no software is going to get you there. But Liminal, for example, helps you by helping apply policies more than they help apply the software that they own, right? They go to a GlaxoSmithKline and say, yeah, you guys want to develop drugs faster and you want to get them out to market. You want to unleash the AI to help you do that. What's it going to cost you from a risk standpoint? What are you going to have to, what is it going to, what's going to be there? We have the same problem. You have to, I know ConnectWise it was a few years ago with Arnie, right? To get your house in order. Like, I think it was a 2018 keynote. We're still needing to get our houses in order, right? The get the policies, get the SOPs, and get those things ready, because without them, you're just asking for a problem. Get the visibility.
Yeah, and for MSPs that don't know and are doing some compliance and are doing risk with their customers already, or maybe want to start talking about these things, educating themselves, ISO just came out with a standard. So there's the ISO 42001 standard. I think you can buy the framework from their website for like $300 or something like that. And you could start, developing some thoughts and some framework around how to actually secure AI, or how to think about it, right? And I mean, we're still very much in a place with AI, and Callen, I want to get your take and your feedback on this, but we're still very much in a place with these LLMs where, there's not a ton of technical controls we can do yet. There are things like Liminal, like you talked about, but really, having the policies, training our people, reinforcing that training when or giving nudges, so to speak, right? Those are the things we can do right now. It's like an insider threat program, right, Tim? I mean, I think it's a very similar concept.
Yeah, I mean, the premise, right? Like, where's your data flow? Is it going off the ranch? Right. Absolutely, right? I mean, that's the big problem with Tim can talk about the challenge of when will AI get to FedRAMP, right? Like, it's going to be a long time.
Right. And so, when I think of large language models, right, when I think of machine learning, when I think of the Chat GPTs, the Bards, the Notions, like, I can rattle off what's there, 5 million coming out every couple of seconds nowadays, right? So, and granted, there's like the enterprise version versus the free version and all this, but like, the first thing that I always try to think about is, where is that data going? And like, if you read through the T's and C's and you read through like the acceptable use and the privacy, and like, nobody reads through that shit, right? Sorry. Well, the first thing I would recommend is
I use the AI to read it for me.
I was going to say, grab the T's and C's, grab that, Chat GPT's terms and conditions and pop it back in there and say, interpret this in 8th grade reading. Right? Dumb this down for me. And it all boils down to, are they using your data? How are they using that data? Where are they using that data? Like, all that kind of stuff. We talk about this all the time. Where's the data and who can do what with it, right? But if you have a data governance policy in place that talks about what you could or could not be sharing and where you can and cannot be sharing, then that kind of helps mitigate the fact that, this happened. I saw an educator take the students' grades, didn't redact it, right? Took all their classroom's grades for the entire year and dumped it into, a Bard-like Chat GPT tool and was like, take all my kids' data and tell me where I'm messing up as a teacher. Well, okay, we just literally put little Johnny and little Sally and everybody else's stuff in this model.
All their faces on TikTok, right? Like,
Well,
I think that's
if you were an MSP and you were doing all your business on an iPhone, and you signed up to some, like, I don't know, you're like
TikTok,
some kind of LML model, right? Like, you would just be getting like prompts like, allow your access to your phone, allow access to your microphone, allow access to this, allow access to your contacts, allow access to your emails, allow access, for them to get contacts and for them to get the tools, like, they have to, there's a cost. So the data is going out the door, being, like I said, off the ranch. If you're okay with that, I guess it's to the degree of like, how do you localize that, right? It's not like you can put OpenAI on-prem and put it over in the corner and leave it on a server. So
yeah, if you want to do like we have been, and actually that's what we were doing, was a Llama 2, and we were looking at local installs, right? So when we were working originally before we sold Refactor, we actually built a pretty cool. There's a cool. It's called Replicated, and it basically turns your SaaS product into a local install type product and allows you to manage it as if it was SaaS. And a lot of people get around on an authority to operate. So I didn't just jump to ATO, which is an alternative to working with FedRAMP when you're working with government entities. And we used Replicated in order to do that, to manage that, right? I think what you'll see is probably someone package up something like a Llama 2 with a Replicated, something we've looked at, and then you'll be able to do that from an industry specific, because otherwise you don't have an option. The problem though is then we get the same issues we have with when we're having to work in like GovCloud, where we can't have openness, we can't have those, and then you're lagging behind. And then how much value are you actually getting from the AI, right? If ChatGPT, we were all just celebrating, those of us that use ChatGPT, that they updated to 2021 and a half, right? So the data in there is 2.5 years old. It's like, how relevant is that data with how fast everything's moving? Right. And so, and that's the most powerful one. So like now we take Llama 2, which is lagging behind that, and then you have to get it on an update cycle. It's the amount of infrastructure that it creates for most companies, it's just not valuable yet. They're still a large piece, and it's pretty interesting from that standpoint. But I think, Tim, you mentioned as well, like the policies and the procedures, and other Tim, you mentioned, if you're okay with your data moving off, that's okay, and it is if you have the right policies, right? It's kind of like FedRAMP. Right. I had to go through FedRAMP. We had employees from Uzbekistan. We had the policy to mitigate any risks with those employees. We worked with the Air Force. They were okay with it because we had the policies. There's nothing inherently that says I can't have a U.S. citizen working on an Air Force thing if the policy and the security controls and everything are followed and in place and provable. Just like AI, if you can track it, right?
Mm-hmm. You mean you were on left of boom, being proactive, shifting left. Wait a minute,
exactly.
Have we just now come full circle?
Yeah.
So I think as we kind of gear towards the last 10 to 15 minutes here, as far as me as an MSP and considering large language, the GPTs, the tools that are out there now, there are some things that can be quite helpful, right? There are some large language models. There are some stuff that can help me as an MSP, right? Especially on like the sales and marketing side, right? Because and kind of like you were saying, maybe like on the ticketing side where it can like,
sentiment analysis. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
as long as it's like self-contained and we're not exposing data and we have the right safeguards in place, especially in tickets, because I can't tell you how many times I had a client like, hey, I can't open this spreadsheet full of credit card numbers and birth dates and everything. Can you help me open this spreadsheet in a ticket? Like, what? So I can foresee some of these large language models being able to actually be beneficial with triage, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Empathy, right? The algorithm can create empathy, which is something that tech people sometimes struggle with, right?
Oh, yeah.
No.
The computer can be more empathetic than the human.
Have you considered this?
Yes.
Well, I was just thinking about this, and this is a good kind of a way to package all of the things we're talking about into a little story. Is 2 days ago, my daughter came home with her chemistry or science study guide for a test she's got coming up. Right, it's on the different states of matter. So it's 2 pages of handwritten answers by her teacher with a printed question. And she's like, "Hey, I want to make flashcards out of this," and we're like, "Well, then go make some flashcards." And, she kind of got grumpy and said, "It's going to take forever." I said, I got an idea. Let's see if we can get ChatGPT to do this. So I took a picture of the sheet with my phone, went into my Google Lens, copied the text out of it, dumped that into ChatGPT, gave it the scenario, and said, "Can you make me a flashcard formatted Word document to print out of this?" Well, sure enough, it pulled that up in 2 minutes. She had her study guide and she was off and studying. Now, one thing I did, though, when I did that is when I took the picture, when I uploaded the data, I made sure to cut off the name of her school, her name, her teacher's name, and it's just the questions. Right. So I don't want to give that to the large language model, but I think if you have your people trained to do those things, you can really experience, and that's that data sorting we were talking about, but then having the human check it and validate the information before it goes to the model. So those are all things that you can policy out, right?
That's a really great analogy, Jesse, and thank you so much for sharing that, because the key points that you made there: redact the data, right? Especially any personal identifying information, redact it. But then that's a really great use case. Now, I would also challenge you, like, as the dad in that scenario, like, all right, you just showed your child how to be extremely efficient. And I love that, in using technology to be extremely efficient. And now that she gained that hour back, did you make her go muck stalls?
I made her practice extra piano. Okay, so I made her do something productive with the time.
Okay. No, I really love the ability to be able. So, my kids are older and grown, and hopefully in 5 or 7 years, when our grandkids are older, we'll be able to do that kind of stuff. But I love the fact that being able to use technology as a tool to assist you in day-to-day life, that's a great analogy. And MSPs, you can think about it in the similar manner. Just redact the data, keep the PII and all that data out of it. And as Callen shared just a few minutes ago, oh my God, empathy. I am the worst. I am you know me, I'm tab A, slot B, move on. And I keep forgetting, oh, there's a human on the other side of that.
Well, yeah. And I know Callen's hearing me say that, and he's thinking, there's actually ways you could have automated that process even better.
It's funny. I've been fighting with my oldest to use AI, and he's terrified because at his previous school, they made them sign something without talking to us about, I won't use AI to do my homework. And it's like, sure, but the research, you can't write your paper with it, but you can do the research. You can use the collective knowledge of all of us. You can spend time making flashcards. You can have it teach you how to complete this algebraic equation. That you just don't put the same equation in unless you're really struggling, then do it, but then take it off and do it 8 times, showing you can do it without it. And I told him, I'm like, I will pay you if you get suspended if they yell at you for using AI, because at the end of the day, he needs to understand that this is just here. So I think all of the naysaying we've done, all of the kind of talk about the security, all the other pieces, and all the prep that people see, I think that I'm glad where we turned in this, because absolutely is something that people need to adopt. Otherwise, they're going to get left behind. They're going to get just completely disrupted.
Right.
And so you've got to start using it.
Think about the days of when we were young and the guy would knock on our door and sell us a set of encyclopedias.
Nice.
Right?
I got the red and the blue set in my parents' basement still.
Whoa, you were bougie, man.
So and now I can just pull up Bard or GPT or something and be like, teach me about ancient Egypt, why the pyramid, like blah blah blah, whatever. And like
Right.
it can be a really good tool when you're just ensuring what are you doing and what data are you putting into it, right? So me, I can't type or spell worth a crap half the time because I'm way too like lazy for the most part. And so it helps me when I'm like, oh, I have a really great idea that I want to talk about, and like help me organize my thoughts, put them together and get that structured. And by the way, spell it right for me. So I'm not putting out garbage half the time, which yes. And so it's been really beneficial to me as someone that is highly dyslexic and my fingers don't keep up with my brain. So it's been really beneficial for me.
Yeah.
Granted, it's my spin and my take and my thoughts, and it's always redacted. I'm gonna wonder at some point when ChatGPT comes back to me and asks me, who is Johnny's Lug Nut Factory?
Oh man. You'd be like,
all right, so we're winding down. We got about 8 minutes left here. As we always like to end the last 5 to 10 minutes here is, key takeaways. Callen, I keep trying to pull you up full screen, but the video keeps getting a little bit wonky. I'm gonna try it one more time and give you an opportunity to what is one major or one key takeaway from today's session that MSPs can be doing?
Prepare. Prepare, drill in, and we're not quite there yet. And you with redacted information, use the AI to help you prepare.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that you can get started on now. Right. You can start incorporating it now and assess. I would also say the other. You said one thing, so I'll leave it at that.
No, keep going. We're good. We still have a few more minutes.
I would say, the 500 tools, assess your stack, make sure that you understand where they fit and make sure that they are providing you value in being proactive. Because I think one of the big things that AI is going to over the next couple of years do is provide those end customers, starting at enterprise now, the way down, with more knowledge on what should be happening. And I think we're going to get held as an industry and just technology in general is going to be held to higher standards, because I don't think that people's understanding will go up. Just like when we added Google Maps, people started getting lost more because they couldn't find their way without the map anymore.
Right.
We're in this area where, and just like our retention as a whole, you look at our species knowledge retention has actually gone down since the implementation of the mobile phones the way they are today, because we have the collective, history of the world at our fingertips. We're going to, I think, actually see a decrease in technical acumen, but a higher standard expectation, because people can basically hold you accountable in 3 seconds by just putting it into a prompt and saying, is this the way it should be done? So I think that prep has to happen now, because I think it's actually going to be harder to justify our existence over the next few years as technologists.
That's a very interesting take on that, like the justifying our existence, because literally at our fingertips, we can prove somebody right or wrong. And so it's an interesting thought. So Tim, what about you?
Yeah, so I mean, I spent a lot of time working on big cognitive AI, whatever ML projects in the past, and obviously a ton of value, right? I mean, Callen's talking, it's intelligent logic that's going to bring, very good insights. I think insights and analytics are something where, not necessarily you get the automation, but you get kind of like things you wouldn't think about, right? Like machines discover patterns that you wouldn't have thought about. So I was probably one of the last ones to really play with Bard and OpenAI. But it's great. Like sandbox it, play with it, test it, iterate. Eventually you'll find something that you want to put into your business. Right now, like the low hanging fruit, I think Jesse mentioned, Tim mentioned, is like the marketing sales tools. Like make me a pitch book, or make me a video, recut up this podcast, right, and pull all the good sound bites out of it. So there's a lot of really good tools and vendors and SaaS that are coming out. I think it's just a matter of experimenting with it, sandboxing it, and getting that kind of make sure you don't cross the line and using data that you're pushing outside the ranch, like we said. So
awesome, thanks. And then Jesse, always words of wisdom.
I think it just speaks to the something I saw Bob Miller comment on today on LinkedIn. If you're not in this, if you're in this industry and you're not a lifelong learner, you're in the wrong industry. So this is a new piece of technology. You need to familiarize yourself with it, and you don't need to jump in whole hog and put yourself at risk because you're using something you don't know how to wield. But yeah, buy the ISO 42001 standard, read through it, start to educate yourself with some of the things to think about as you deploy AI, because your customers are going to ask you about it. You want to be able to speak intelligently on it, and it'll give you a good framework to start, really building out an approach and a structured method for deploying this and deploying it safely in your business and in your clients.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And obviously, my key takeaway is be prepared, shift left, get your documentation in order, decide if you're planning to use these large language models, these generative AI, these tool sets in your business. Make sure you have a well-documented data governance policy. Make sure you have actually take the time to train your end user on them so that they know what is acceptable and not acceptable. Just like Jesse did with his kid, redact the data, honey, take the student's name and the school off of the thing, and then use the tool, right? Benefit from all of that, language learning and all of that knowledge that's there, but don't put your kid's name out there, right? So if you're going to do this work in your MSP and you're going to bring these things into your business or your clients asking about it in their own business, redact it, back it up with a policy and procedure, and not just have a policy and procedure, but bring it all the way to the end user at the organization and teach them what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Hell, for all I care, use Jesse's analogy of creating flashcards, right? It's a great little nugget here, Jesse. So, yeah. And then, hey, I think, we have a lot of really great things coming up here on Team Tim. Gosh, I can't.
We've got another AI, hats.ai coming up in 2 weeks.
Oh, hats? Wait.
Hats. Jimmy Hatzel guy? Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just come over here and see.
Never heard of him. Yeah.
Never heard of him.
Next week is Tim Fitzpatrick. Marketing.
So let me do this real quick. Let's do this real quick. Hopefully I'm not sharing too much stuff, but if you haven't seen already, we have quite a great lineup for this quarter already. We've got Jimmy coming talking about his new AI platform. We've got, oh my gosh, we have the battles of the Millers, the Lees and the Tims, right? So Jesse Miller and Bob Miller versus Team Tims, right? Yeah. Maybe we've been kind of playing around with trying to get Phyllis Lee and Matt Lee onto this whole, the six of us, who will stand up on CIS. And so, yeah, we have a really great lineup coming up here on Team Tim in the coming weeks. Excuse me, choking on my words. And so we're pretty excited about, what's in store for us for this year. It's hard to believe that we've been doing this for 7 months now, every Friday, and it just keeps getting better and better. So, anyways,
I was going to say, Callen, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your insights. It was super informative. I picked up a couple of different things, and so I really appreciate you joining today.
Awesome. Yes.
Oh, happy to. Glad we can make it work.
Thank you so much. Have a safe trip there. And, everybody else, we'll see you next week, and do the things.
Subscribe now.